Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Just to introduce myself, my name is Nick Gold, Managing Director of Speakers Corner. Thank you so much once again for returning people, and for those of you who are joining us for the first time joining us, Speakers Corner, at our virtual showcase. Delighted to have you here. And without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you and hand over to Sally Bundock from a television station that I cannot name, who you might recognise, who'll be delighted to host the event and introduce some fantastic speakers for you.
Very, very warm welcome to this afternoon's Speakers Corner Virtual Masterclass. New times require new leaders. So this is the 7th Speakers Corner Connect Virtual Showcase event, which is a program that was put together to basically show event organisers how the power of the spoken word can be delivered via a virtual platform during these very unusual and unprecedented times. So as Nick mentioned, I'm going to be your host for this afternoon. It's great to have you with us. And most of my working week is spent at BBC News. I present a very early morning business and news program. We're also on BBC World News as well, and it's a 1-hour program packed with news, business, all you need to know. And as you can imagine right now, it's completely dominated by the global pandemic and coronavirus. And actually something we talk about a lot, and I interview every day politicians, chief executives, epidemiologists, health experts, you name it, economists. But every single day we're talking about COVID-19, how it has changed literally everything. And like it or not, the global pandemic has meant that all of us have had to change and get used to working and living in a very different way and having to adapt to that. And this does require strong, good leadership and a new type of leadership to help us navigate through this new world and come out the other side as stronger individuals, teams, and businesses. That is the hope. So we've secured this afternoon for you a really good lineup of speakers who will provide a level of insight and understanding that will help you and your teams navigate this brand new world. And if you would like any information about me or about this afternoon's speakers, you can, of course, contact the Speakers Corner team. So let me introduce you to the 3 speakers and tell you a little bit about them before I hand over to them. So we have Sahar Hashemi, who is from a top-notch corporate lawyer who knew nothing about retail, to an entrepreneur who turned the Brits from tea lovers into coffee drinkers. So if you spend a lot of money on coffee these days, Sahar maybe has a little bit to do with that. She has a really good story to share as a keynote speaker. So as founder of the UK's first coffee bar chain, Coffee Republic, Sahar understands entrepreneurial behaviour to the core. She believes what makes startup culture different from corporate culture isn't the stereotypical, football tables in your office and company hoodies. It's not about that. It's the special connections startup employees have with the business they work in and the customers they serve. And in a moment, Sahar will be sharing her expertise with us. Also, I'm very pleased to say we have waiting in the wings Rene Carayol, who is one of the world's leading business gurus specializing in leadership, culture, and transformation. Rene has had the privilege of working very closely with some of the world's best known leaders, for example, former US President Bill Clinton, to chief executives of blue chip businesses, including the former head of the World Bank, Jim Yong Kim. He's also worked with Ralph Heimers of ING, Mario Greco at Generali, and Maria Ramos at Barclays Africa. So a wide range of individuals and businesses. And as well as one of the world's leading executive coaches working with such individuals, he has also been a chairman, chief executive, and managing director of blue chip businesses. So it's a real pleasure to have Rene with us as well. And then we will hear from Nicky Moffat, who's had a 27-year career in the Armed Forces, Army Headquarters, the Ministry of Defence, and at the Centre of Government. So Nicky is Army Capability Director in the rank of Brigadier, which is the most senior woman in the Army. She was responsible for the leadership, professional output and standards of 4,500 officers and soldiers, and for delivering major business change whilst in that role. Nicky's experience as Private Secretary to the Secretary of State for Defence during a period of close parliamentary and media scrutiny amidst fast-moving operations both at home and abroad complements her success that she achieved in the military. So it's brilliant to have all three of these speakers with us, and I will hand over to Sahar in just a second. But first of all, I'd just like to tell you how to make the most of these three individuals and get out of them what you want to know. And that is by getting involved and clicking on the Q&A box, which you can see in the corner there at the bottom. Click on that Q&A box to send us your questions for the three speakers, and anything for me as well if you wish to. Don't use the chat box, that won't work in this particular occasion. So it's the Q&A box to send us your questions for the three speakers. So without further ado, I want to hand over to Sahar Hashemi, who will share her expertise with us. Sahar, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you for Speaker's Corner for inviting me. Really what I want to say is the title of this masterclass is New Times Require New Leaders. And from my angle, I come from the entrepreneurship angle. I think what's happened to us, this crisis brought upon all of us, requires entrepreneurial leadership. Because I think entrepreneurial leadership is going to be the answer to get us out of this. And I just want to say, before I discuss entrepreneurial leadership, is one of the huge myths about being entrepreneurial. And I very much come into this, it's deeply personal for me, this idea of being entrepreneurial, because I think a lot of us think that it's a trait some of us have, some of us not. So we immediately discount this idea that we have everything we need. We have all the tools we need to be entrepreneur ourselves. And I come from that background because I came, as Sally said, from a very corporate background. And I thought that way of thinking, that creative entrepreneurial way of thinking, was perhaps reserved for, at that time, the sort of Richard Bransons of this world, where you had to be some sort of a swashbuckling visionary, that, you know, you were a risk taker by nature. And I was none of those things. I was a corporate lawyer. Couldn't be further away for someone who hated risk, for someone who hated uncertainty. I had to do everything by the book. But what happened to me was I got this idea to bring US style coffee bars to the UK. This is really early on, before we had Starbucks. I'd seen a Starbucks coffee in New York, and really that spark, that little idea I had, because I remember, you know, having a sort of skinny latte at this first coffee bar I saw in New York and thinking, I can't believe we don't have it. There must be a gap in the UK that we don't have this idea. And I, you know, left the corporate world and I embarked on what I didn't realize was an entrepreneurial journey of bringing US style coffee bars to the UK. In that journey, from the idea in my head to actually opening the UK's first coffee bar, I didn't realize I did certain things. I went through certain process. And it was only afterwards that I realized that process was, for me, the process of entrepreneurship. And I ended up using tools I had that I'd never even know I had those tools. So kind of my point being that, in a way, none of us are born entrepreneurs. None of us are born entrepreneurial leaders, but we've got it all within us, and we just need to activate it. And so when you're an entrepreneur starting a business, you have to activate the entrepreneurial tools you have in you, because, you know, you've got an idea, everything's against you. You have no resources, you have no credibility, you have no customers, you have no suppliers. So you end up having to behave in a certain way. But the contrast to this sort of behavior, the entrepreneurial behavior, is if you've worked in a big company. If you worked in a big company, you almost behave the opposite of an entrepreneur. Because when you work in a big company, there are set ways of doing things. There's sort of almost industry practice. You've already got customers who are there. You've got rules and regulations. You've got a boss you've got to kind of look up to. You get appraised. So you behave in almost this very un-entrepreneurial way, which is why I think, you know, if you actually look in the dictionary, if you look up the word entrepreneur, at the bottom, where it gives you what the opposite of an entrepreneur is, what the antonym is. You see the opposite of an entrepreneur in the Oxford Dictionary is an employee. And that's what I felt has always been wrong, because actually it's the same people. It's just that, you know, whether or not you actually trigger the entrepreneurial tools because of the environment. Well, now post-COVID, the point is actually that everyone in whatever company you are, the biggest multinational with the biggest market share, or whether or not you're an SME that's growing, we've all been thrown into the same waters. And those, for me, I call them almost startup waters, when there's uncertainty, there's a lack of safety net, there are few resources, you never know what's going to happen. And you've almost got to get back to your customers. You've got to regain the customer trust again. You've got to almost build your businesses back. And that is what the opportunity is, you know, there's always that silver lining, I think, in life. And this silver lining is now everyone has to behave like an entrepreneur. It's not even a luxury anymore to, you know, we have to think more innovatively, or we have to think like an entrepreneur. It's almost imperative. It's survival. And I can promise you, you and everyone in your team has got what it takes to behave like an entrepreneur. For me, it's almost 8 behaviors, but I could even reduce them to almost 6 behaviors that anyone can do to ignite the entrepreneurial energy in your team. And I've seen it, you know, I grew a company with entrepreneurial energy, and then we got big. And suddenly, as we became a big corporate company, we lost that energy. So I know when it's there and I know when it's not there. I've seen it firsthand. And I genuinely believe is that recapturing it is going to be really easy. It's some simple steps you take that are intuitive anyway. And that's going to be the future. And, you know, sometimes they say, you know, necessity is the mother of reinvention. And my God, this has happened. It's been out of our control. But herein lies an opportunity to get everyone together in your teams and start this new kind of leadership, which for me is entrepreneurial leadership. Thank you, Sahar.
Sahar, that was great. Thank you very much indeed. And I've written lots of notes myself as well, so we'll have some questions for you later, I am sure. So let's now hear from Rene Carayol. Rene, if you'd like to share with us your thoughts, your expertise in this unprecedented time. Rene, over to you.
Thank you. So look, where I wanted to start here is, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And when we look at internationally, globally, there's a lesson that that should attract all of our attentions. There is no nation being led by a woman that's handling the pandemic badly. Now, we should all have that stuck inside of our minds. And what it says to me is this thing that we call emotional intelligence, the EQ. Now, the thing is, all of the top 15 nations, apart from Bangladesh, that are doing really badly, are all led by alpha males, would you believe? The life and soul of the party, the big picture, the person that cracks all the jokes, who can't really govern. So, here's my premise. EQ is more important than IQ when it comes to today's leadership. Women tend to be so much better at it than men, but it's not about gender. There are some men who can do it really brilliantly. And you know what they always say, that managers talk strategy, leaders tell stories. I got a few stories for you to try and bring this alive. It's the role of the leader to connect everyone into the organization. Alongside emotional intelligence, the other blessing we need for today, the other gift every leader needs to have, inclusion. If diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance when you've got there. Inclusion is what leads to belonging. 3 men working on a building site in the burning sun. Breaking rocks, it's the toughest work you've ever seen. They're all 3 dripping in sweat. The journalist comes to the first one and says, "Why do you do this job?" "I haven't worked for 3 years. I took the first job I could get." Goes to the second one, "Why do you do this job?" "I've got a wife and 3 kids to feed. I took the first job I could get." Goes to the third one, "Why do you do this job?" He looks up, wipes the sweat from his brow, leans proudly on his spade, and he says, "I'm helping to build a cathedral. I'm helping to build a cathedral." Temple, mosque, synagogue, depending on where you are. The role of the leader is to make every single person in their team, in the business, in the organization, feel as though they're part of something special and they've got someone to believe in and something to belong to. It's not something you do every week. It's something you do every day. You're helping me build these stained glass windows. You're helping build the spire. You're not doing something repetitive. You're not doing something at arm's length. You're doing something really integral and really special. You know, they say that until lions have their own storytellers, the stories of the hunt will always favor the hunter. Story number 2. I rarely get a call when things are going brilliantly. I still dream of getting that call when things are going brilliantly. I get the call when things are going so bad that they're going to call me in. Step into the fire with me, please. It's Tuesday night. It's 10 o'clock in the evening. Angie calls me. Angie's the Group HR Director of Sainsbury. Rene, can you have breakfast with our Group Chief Executive, Mike Coop, tomorrow morning? I need you to be in there at 7 a.m. Thanks, Angie. What's going down? He's called together a meeting of the operating board, the top 40 people at Sainsbury's. He's going to give us some rather tough news. What news is that? He's going to tell all of us that 20% of our annual bonus is now going to be inclusion. That sounds like a good thing, Angie. There's been no preparation, hasn't told anyone there's going to be a bit of a right. 20% is such a large chunk of everyone's bonus. We're having breakfast in the morning and he's stuffing me full of data. Graphs, charts, data. 5 years before becoming chief executive, he was CFO. He loves the numbers. The truth about numbers don't create excitement. Leaders create excitement. Stories create excitement. He's going to address these people and he had irrefutable evidence, inarguable evidence. But it wasn't going to touch them. It wasn't going to inspire them. I said, Mike, how about a story? What do you mean a story? I explained what I meant by a story. I wasn't sure this was going to go down well. I stayed and stood at the back of the room at 9 o'clock. Mike stood up and he told this story. Mike was born in a small village outside Solihull in the Midlands in England. He was the first member of his extended family to ever go to university. He didn't go to any university. He went to Balliol College, Oxford. When he arrived at the doors of this great learning institution, within minutes, he was made to feel that he had the wrong accent. The first meal, there was so much cutlery, so much crockery, so many glasses. He didn't know how to navigate his way around lunch, let alone the institution. The day after, there was a white tie party. Mike didn't know what white tie was. Mike shared that his first year was one of the worst years of his life. He felt invisible. At the end of his first year, a couple of guys grabbed hold of him and said, let's show you the ropes. We'll show you around this very strange, archaic institution. We'll show you how to navigate it. They taught him the unwritten laws. His second year was one of the best years of his life. He said, ladies and gentlemen, I know what it feels like to be invisible. We have 170,000 employees. As I walk around the depots, the warehouses, the stores of Sainsbury, far too many of our colleagues feel invisible. They do not feel included. They do not feel as though they belong. Until now. I need you to join me to ensure everyone who works here at Sainsbury feels as though they're part of something special. They feel as though they belong. There were no issues. There were no complaints. They took the 20% and they went on that mission. The power of the story. It's an emotional connection. And I suppose I wanted to close with my third story. And this happened yesterday. And it's inclusion again, it's emotional intelligence, and it's powerful. On the 16th of September, I'm doing a talk for Microsoft. I'm working with Microsoft EMEA, their European, Middle East, and African division. And we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter. The chief executive of the division, Ralph, wants to do something special. I've spoken to the team, we've set up a format, and we are going to have 30 minutes on Zoom. No, it wasn't. It was Teams. It's never Zoom with Microsoft, is it? It's Teams. It's Teams. So we're going to do Teams, and me and him are going to see if we can get a connection. I push him. He pushes back. We talk about inclusion. We talk about belonging. We talk about what it means to him. Why is it important to him now? He challenged me. Why can't he say all lives matter? I pushed him back to explain why Black Lives Matter is key. 30 minutes passed, 45 minutes. We get to 50 minutes. And he says to me, I got it. I've got it. But I can feel it's intense, it's highly charged. He's getting emotional, I'm getting emotional. And he told me this story. He said he'd been at Microsoft for 15 years. The first 11 years he was in Germany. He's German. He got to become chief executive of Microsoft Germany. He grew it brilliantly. He quadrupled profits. He made it really, really zing. He was aiming at the job he's got today, chief executive Microsoft EMEA. He's now the third most important person in the company. He's on that journey. He wants to become group chief executive. He's doing all the right things. But we've pushed each other now. And he's now saying to me, I'm not sure I'm the right person to be the next group chief executive of Microsoft. I'm middle class. I'm middle-aged. I'm white, I'm German. I'm male. I'm now wondering whether the next group chief executive of Microsoft looks a little bit more like you than they look like me. And perhaps they need to be a woman. I leave you with that thought. I leave you with that thought.
That's a great thought to leave us with, and we shall hear more from you in a little bit when we get through our questions and answers, because many are coming in, which is really good. Thank you for hitting that Q&A and sharing your thoughts, etc., and your questions for our panelists. So let's now hear from Nicky Moffat. Nicky, if you'd like to share with us what you have to say this afternoon, and then we'll get on to a panel discussion.
Thank you. Hello. There was a piece published in the Harvard Business Review 2000 by a chap called Daniel Goleman, and the piece was entitled Leadership That Gets Results. Goleman interviewed about 3,000 executives, and amongst a number of conclusions was the conclusion that a manager's leadership style accounted for 30% of a company's bottom line profitability. So clearly significant, not marginal gains. And of course, that is why the conversations that we're having today are so important. Getting the leadership style right is critical to business outcomes. I'm going to focus on two things today. Firstly, people, because we lead people, not organisations and not projects, but people ultimately. And secondly, I'm going to talk about some practical things that you and your people might wish to do further to enhance your own leadership capability within your respective organisations and teams. So when I talk about leaders, and I talk about leaders at all level, I mean everybody, anyone and everybody who has a responsibility, even for one other person, or for leading a project or for leading a team. I think sometimes maybe that word leader, people assume it means people higher up in the organisation. So I like to talk directly to people at every level, because if we can enhance leadership at every level, we're far more likely to make substantive gains. And I think in addition, having a people focus is really critical in challenging times, in times like these, because it's one of those things that helps establish trust between leaders and managers and the workforce. And of course, that includes, the people focus includes the client focus, critical again to listen in order to adapt and to change requirements or relationships as required. I want to talk a little bit about a change mindset, because I think a change mindset is the thing that most delineates the difference between a leader and a manager. Leaders are more likely to be driving change. A manager is more likely to be managing the routine or specific projects, perhaps mainly in a more stable environment. A leader sets the direction, whereas perhaps the manager is planning more of the detail. The leader is asking the questions, formulating the questions and identifying the problems, whereas perhaps a manager's job is to find the answers and solutions. So many differences, but leaders with change mindsets, to my mind, fit into the bracket of transformational leaders. And new times need new leaders. They don't necessarily need new people, but they do need new times, need people who have that sense of transformation and change sort of in their DNA. And it's something that sometimes people have, but it's also something that can be developed. Good leaders, to my mind, are uncomfortable with the not knowing, but laser focused on finding out what they need to find out. And it can be quite an uncomfortable place for a leader to not know things. If you think about, let's say, a general counsel, who's of course a leader of the legal function, or you think about somebody who's a head of or a director of, they're used to being experts in not only in their field, but in terms of doing things, in business, in times of routine, in times of stability, and of course in terms of dealing with crises. But perhaps never in our time a crisis on this scale, and therefore it can feel really uncomfortable for us, for leaders, to not know things, to not necessarily have the monopoly of wisdom or to know all of the answers. And what I would say to that is that I think as leaders, and again leaders at all levels, the more comfortable that we can become with not knowing everything, but being clear about what we don't know, where the gaps are, and then having a plan to try and work out what needs to be done, probably the better. And that makes us perhaps feel more comfortable, but also those for whom we're responsible. And it took me quite some time to develop skills in this regard. And that's partly, I think, because change can feel much more uncomfortable at the bottom of an organisation, where you can perhaps feel powerless and the subject of change, rather than at the top of the organisation, where you're more in control. That leads me on to the impact of change on people. Change, unpredictability, uncertainty, the speed of change. Obviously, those things impact people in very, very different ways. And one of the things we need to remember as leaders is that our experience and our reaction to change is not necessarily the same experience and reaction to change of others. So developing that fine-tuned understanding of our people in our organisation, to understand how they are thinking about change, acting in change, and also feeling about change is really important. And of course, with physical distancing, that can be more difficult, but we still as leaders have to find more ways to be present in order to make sure that we are listening to what our people are saying. We're trying to decipher what they're thinking, and really importantly, we're getting a sense of what they're feeling. Because some of them, of course, are experiencing stress, fear, disorientation, fatigue, a sense of disempowerment. Whereas others, of course, are thriving on change or thriving on the thought of change. I'm the sort of individual who thrives on change. But my job isn't to power on regardless as a leader. My job is to understand that there are people potentially in a different space, within my team, and to work out ways in which I can helpfully bring them on board. On to some practical thoughts, or further practical thoughts, on what leaders can do in these challenging times. And I always keep in the forefront of my mind a quote from a chap called Euripides, who's obviously been around a while. What he said back thousands and thousands of years ago is that 10 soldiers wisely led will beat 100 without a head. And the word I focus on is wisely, because that's actually, to my mind, the thing that we need more of, wisdom, as we identify new ways in which to lead and to adapt in this challenging world. And the other phrase that always comes to mind is the adapt or die phrase, something of course hugely important in a military context, but also important more widely of course as well. So what can a leader do? Well, they can set the tone. Ideally a tone that has a degree of authority about it, based on developing knowledge and understanding and all of the normal things that leaders and managers of course would want to do. A sense of purpose, but also an affiliative leadership style where you are people focused, a coaching leadership style where you're understanding that people will need development and support in terms of their growth, an empathetic leadership style, understanding that people have lives outside of work and that the pandemic may be impacting them in ways which are particularly challenging for them personally. And all of that, again, is about building trust between the leader and their people. Secondly, establishing and giving clarity on new ways of working. One of the things that makes individuals feel comfortable is a degree of certainty, is a degree of knowing what requirements are. And therefore, the clearer we can be in terms of setting out new things, structures, the shape of the virtual environment, the routines, supervision, collaboration, creating routines that work, but importantly, not just routines that work for the leader perhaps who loves getting up at 5 in the morning, or the leader who likes all of the calls late at night because they have other things that they need to deal with at home. Remembering that every single individual in the team is an individual, has a unique set of circumstances, and therefore finding ways to create a structure and a routine that works for the majority rather than just the leader or the few is always a useful approach. Maintaining contact and connection. Again, it's difficult physical isolation, but ensuring that there are sufficient measures of communication or ways in which to communicate is obviously quite critical. Again, I think what I would suggest there is that a leader who is always seeking to check up rather than check in probably hasn't quite got it right. There's a softer way of trying to achieve things. Clarity of direction on things that are known. So whether it's the business focus, the priorities, what needs to be done before something else, those sorts of things can help people have a handrail of certainty rather than the uncertainty of not quite knowing what they need to do. And of course, sometimes it's easier for people to check up when you're in the physical office environment. Maybe it's more challenging to have that little check-in when we're working in more of a virtual world. Devolving authority and responsibility downwards. The brilliant thing, of course, about any organisation is its people, and it's those people's ability to use all of their individuality, their insight, experience, their brains, their capability to come up with ideas. Because as leaders, we haven't got the monopoly of wisdom. So the more we're able to empower people within maybe some boundaries or constraints, legal, financial, or practical, whatever, but the more we can do that, probably the more creative and entrepreneurial energy we'll create within our organisations. And I think just 3 final things there. People have got a heightened sense of what's important to them personally during this pandemic. So if you'll excuse my phraseology, the more of the crap that we can cut, i.e. the things that mess people around, maybe reports and returns that nobody ever reads, maybe the regularity of those things or the times of those things, the more we can take that stressor out, the better. And again, what it's doing is it's building more trust and more perhaps responsiveness between the leader and their people. And the 2 final things there, share recognition or give recognition and share success, and say thank you more and more and more regularly. It's not quite the same thing perhaps as doing it face to face, But the more that's done, both individually, one-to-one, and you know, within team environments, I think the better. It takes seconds to do that. One of the things I used to do when I was a brigadier and a director of my branch of the army, and actually previously in other roles, was write a small little handwritten card, not typed, not an email, but a handwritten card to say thank you or well done to individuals amongst my 4,000 officers and soldiers who weren't, you know, physically in the same space. It took seconds, and I think given the feedback that I had from individuals, that it had a disproportionate, really positive impact on them. So, to conclude, adapt or die. Leadership is a service to others. It's hard work because it involves the leader doing their job and also supporting other people in doing theirs. New times probably need more leaders who are transformational in their mentality and their thinking, but transactional leaders are also, of course, hugely important, and managers who steady the ship. Leaders, to my mind now, need an enhanced understanding of what leadership means in practice. They may be subject matter experts, but maybe more focused now on training for leadership or leadership development so that they understand what's required of them. No soldier on promotion to Lance Corporal is given that rank without preparation and training to give them the skills and the managerial competencies that they need to do the job. Why would we ask anyone to have responsibility for our people, that important asset, without giving them the training and the skills to do so? And finally, leaders, to my mind, in this new world need to be, as I've said, trained, but also equipped to understand how to manage a diverse workforce. And I mean a diverse workforce, not just people who are not like me or like you, but people who think differently, potentially act differently on the basis of their experience and skills, but also feel differently. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to further questions.
Thank you all to all our speakers, because very unusually they have not only stuck to time, but we have got more time for the panel Q&A, which is great. And I want to highlight to begin with, Sahar, if we start with you, because you mentioned in your speech, if I can describe it that there were 6 tips of entrepreneurial leadership, and Debbie Price, Rene Garcia Evans, and Andrew Shoesmith are saying, what are those 6 tips? And I'm sure they're not alone. So could you sum them up quite quickly?
Great. Well, I think the 6 tips are, the first one is not depersonalizing customers. Now, I know when one mentions customers, everyone's like switching off thinking, well, there's nothing new. What I mean is that customer service isn't actually about customers. Focusing on customers is actually not for the customers, it's for your employees. Because what I've seen is an entrepreneurial environment, it's all about the customer. The customer is the sun and the moon, because you've got no one else. You've got no structure, you've got no salary. So all you think about when you're an entrepreneur is you wake up in the morning and you put yourself in the customer's shoes. You think, what would the customer want? It's just what keeps the customer at night? What problems the customer got? Because there's nothing else to fall back on. All you think about is the customer. It's just, they inspire you. Whereas, in a bigger company, your boss inspires you. The customer is sort of out there. So I can't say how important it is. Number one is to take all your shift, all your filter should be, what's the customer's problem? And my God, when we go back, the customer's going to have lots of problems, much less spending power, more difficult resources. So take everyone back to the customer and see how this changes. But that is my number one. But the next 5 are actually don't do something. So the way to take your whole culture, your whole team back to the customer is, number 2, you've got to be really careful of all the bureaucracy and all the busyness. Because what you don't understand is, in good times, we put rules and processes, we micromanage people. But when you micromanage too much, you're putting cold water over people's enthusiasm, people's emotional connection. So, in a way, being entrepreneurial means, think about all the processes. They shouldn't be there for their own sake. Make sure they do something that actually, if they're not serving a purpose, get rid of them. So really simplify, really kind of, bring trust back rather than the micromanaging in a way. Give people the time to have for customers. Number two is beware of experience. When times are good in a corporate company, it's, this is how we do things, this is industry practice. And we get so stuck on this is how we do things that we discount new ideas. Whereas when we go back, frankly, how we've always done things doesn't work anymore anyway. So it's about having an open mind, really, a curiosity, like you're a tourist in a small town. Look to see what else you can do. Be a bit more naive when you go back, because how you've always done things is just gone completely obsolete anyway. The fourth one, and therefore the third no, is perfectionism. As an entrepreneur, I hate perfectionism. I think in the corporate world, we use being a perfectionist as an excuse to do things. We think being a perfectionist is a sort of search for greatness, but actually, frankly, it's just us procrastinating. It's fear in a different form. Whereas as an entrepreneur, there is no perfect. You just do things. You just try something. And I just, my motto in life actually is anything worth doing is worth doing badly. Just when you go back, try things. It's not going to work the first time round, and it's not going to be the way you've always done it. You're not going to be doing it through the normal channels. So you've got to do a bit of bootstrapping, a bit of Blue Peter stuff to get it going. So the fourth one is this perfection. The other one is that really stops you being entrepreneurial. So another don't is fear. We're also fearful that we almost think we're not safe anymore. And I'm not sure if you think we're not safe now. Were we safe back in January, February? We didn't even know what was going on, right? So there's like the old safe and there's a new safe. And it's just realizing, actually, you know what? It's just every day, you mustn't think of that. There is no safety anymore. The comfort zone just doesn't exist. It never did. It was like an illusion. It was a false sense of security. So, forget about the fear and just think, the only way for you to do something, because, you can be safe and not try anything, but then you will never do anything. So forget about the fear and just keep going. And the sixth one is being ourselves. Culture, the way you bring culture together is about bringing everyone towards this common goal. People are obsessed with purpose, but for me, purpose is not necessarily your company has to have a cure for cancer or save the planet. Purpose is everyone in your team knowing what they do every day is helping someone. So bring your whole team back to the customer, give them a sense of purpose, that they're part of something. This is what startups are like, because you're becoming more human. So I think, being entrepreneurial in a way is having a much more human culture, where it's not about fixed, perfection and systems and processes. It's just a group of people trying to get a job done. And I think that is what it's going to be like. So those are the six. So customers, get rid of bureaucracy, get rid of perfectionism, get rid of the fear and the old comfort zone, and let everyone be themselves. And you'll see how everyone will rise up to it and be able to perform at their best.
Okay, Sahar, brilliant. Thank you so much for summing that up in such a short space of time. Now, Rene, something you said in your presentation was you talked about emotional intelligence and how that in this environment is much better than IQ. You mentioned the top 10 nations doing so badly are led by alpha males who aren't governing as well. I was just curious, do you think if Theresa May was still our Prime Minister, things might be different in terms of where we are in the UK, how we've handled COVID?
You might have chosen someone other than Theresa.
Well, she was in the job, wasn't she?
Manager, not leader. A very good manager, not a brilliant leader, I would have to say. And I would say, and it was interesting because I was listening very carefully when Nicky was speaking. So I would say that if we looked at leadership and management, one is hardware, one is software. One is EQ, one is IQ. And if someone said to me to describe what managers do, it's the plans, the strategy, all the tangible things. And as the book says, if you can't measure, you can't manage. Where I think today's change agents are at, and where I think the real truth is at, is if it's vision, people, teams, culture. That's the thing that the leaders today look at: vision, people, teams, culture. Push everything else down to your people. And if I look at those people who do that really well today, they're few and far between. But look at the leadership of the Scandinavian countries. Look at Jacinda Ardern down in New Zealand. Astonishing. But where it really comes down to is the ability to connect with people. And it brings me back to Maya Angelou's great quote: "Not everyone will remember everything you said, but everyone will remember how you made them feel. That's it.
All right, so Rene, this is from someone who's tuned in this afternoon, who's been watching, Scott Lincoln, who says, how do you try and keep people aligned with your company culture at scale? And that was a point that Sahar made, was it gets difficult the bigger you become to keep that entrepreneurial spirit going.
That great question.
With everyone. When you become big, how do you do that?
So I told the story of the cathedral. The role of the leader is every single day and every opportunity. We used to call it management by walking around many years ago. Find the different ways to walk around without a to-do list, without a task list. You're not checking up. You're reminding people why they're there. I think Sahar called it purpose. Some people call it vision, but it's reminding them why they're there every minute of every day. The leader has no bigger responsibility. You're part of building something special. We've all heard the story with JFK. Walks into Cape Canaveral and the Apollo moon mission, someone's sweeping the floors. What are you doing? I'm helping to put a man on the moon. Everybody needs to understand they're playing a huge and significant part. And the role of the leader, be they the receptionist, be they be the chief operating officer, your job is to make them feel they're part of something special. Not once every month, every minute of every day.
That's hard work, isn't it?
Leadership has always been hard work.
When you're having a bad day, you're not feeling it, you're not there, you didn't sleep because it was so hot the night before.
Don't be a leader. Give it to someone else. Get out the chair, let someone else do it. It is tough, it is hard, but that's why.
Would you agree, Nicky? Would you agree? Sorry, Sahar, we'll come back to you in a sec. But Nicky, would you agree with that? Surely you've got to have a
yeah, I mean, you know, we're all entitled to a bad day, but I do agree with the sense that yes, you've got to be able to inspire other people. You've got to be able to motivate, to energize, and to inspire others. And you know, whether it's with your vision or your purpose or your energy. Or your, you know, sense of direction, you know, whatever it is, you've got to be able to do that. But I do think that actually the more trust that you've built up between yourself and your teams, I think that's where the leeway comes in. You know, we are all entitled to a bad day. And in the same way that I would, you know, give people a break, I think leaders are entitled to a break, but just not every day and all the time.
So you were just about to say something. What did you want to say?
Yes, exactly. Following on from you were saying to Rene, that it's actually difficult doing that. What Rene was saying, you know, leadership by walkabout, which I love, is I couldn't, you know, I think it's actually much easier because this is about a human emotion, and we're so used to almost suppressing the human side of work, because work was work and life was life. And my God, now with the work from home, you know, what a complete mix. There's no difference between work and life anymore. And so it's about being authentic in what you do. And I find before, you know, people used to do royal visits almost, you know, when we became a bigger company, if a leader goes around, everyone knows the leader's going around. He literally goes around like the royal family with his people behind him and telling him, no, it's all about this honest stuff. And when you're honest, when you're yourself, it's just something that happens really naturally. And, you know, we have humans in an organization, so we have to behave in a human way. And
I agree. I think a level of vulnerability is important because it allows other people, you know, to be vulnerable. And I think also, just picking up on your point about management by walkabout, I think it's really important that a leader doesn't surround themselves by yes people, or, as you've described, go into you know, a bit of their organisation as if it's a royal visit or set up as a royal visit. The thing I was most interested in hearing from my soldiers was the reality on the ground, in the engine room, you know, what their experiences were. You know, and obviously the usual way that works is that the brigadier comes in and the sergeant major's standing there next to the private soldier. If that feels intimidating, then it's my job to the soldier, it's my job to make sure that the soldier doesn't feel intimidated and is able to tell me, you know, what I want, which is the truth, rather than, you know, a sort of tinted version of it.
Can I just
sorry, Sally, there's a really interesting point on the back of that, because I couldn't agree more. There was a time when the hierarchy was all about challenge down, support up. Today, to really make it work, is challenge up and support down.
Yeah, that's a very good Clear way of putting it, actually. Very, very clear. And Nicky, we've had a question for you, but I mean, all three of you can answer this. Can you share a time when you've been criticized for being bossy, aggressive because you're a woman? Or Rene, I don't know, in your case, because you're a black man, maybe you're from, you know, an ethnic minority. I mean, how do you overcome that situation when you feel you're being challenged because of who you are?
I don't think, I mean, who knows, maybe people have called me bossy. It's not a word that I've heard people use. And of course, through 360 assessments, you know, you might sort of, you know, hear those sorts of things. I think my second point is that because I was working in the army and the armed forces, aggression controlled and used in the appropriate way is something that is important within the armed forces and the army, because, you know,
what about within central government, you know, in the Ministry of Defence, within Westminster, which I don't think is that great for women, is it?
I think that the way I look at it, and it took me a while to get to this stage, but I learned fairly early on in my career, in my sort of early, well, late 20s, that it was really important to understand stuff, to have knowledge, to understand the situation and the broader context, you know, the bigger picture. I understood that really quite early on. But until I understood that, I was underconfident and, you know, didn't present perhaps in the way that you see me presenting now. Once I'd understood that, and once I'd worked hard to make sure that I knew what I was talking about, I suppose then it became more difficult for others who may or may not have been less well prepared to challenge me. And therefore, I would say that the word that they were more likely to use was probably a bit intimidating. Was I concerned about that? Well, if I'd felt it was intimidating in a really negative way, then I would have said, yes, that's a problem. But if it was based on, you know, knowledge and understanding, and really trying to do the best thing and to get the best from people, then I was less concerned about it. You know, it is something, bossy, aggressive, intimidating, whatever those words are, people throw them around, and often it's about trying to cut the legs away from under somebody, and I think that's really unhelpful, particularly a woman. You know, maybe a me. I don't know. I can't comment on that, obviously.
Sahar, give us your thoughts on this. I mean, you're in corporate law. You're in big corporate organisations, female, and you know, not non-white, not British.
Well, you know, I mean, the way I see it is, if I've had criticisms, I don't really associate it with gender or race or anything. You know, if I've come across maybe too strong to someone in my team, perhaps, you know, I take that in. So I try not to associate those sort of comments with gender. I think if any defects I have are my character defects, regardless of my gender, race, or upbringing. So you've got to accept some, and as Nicky said, some of them people are just saying it. So I think it's just not to be too sensitive about them, and if it's constructive, go with it in a way.
Rene, any thoughts?
Yes, and so demanding is the word I get called on. Demanding. I think though that today we have to earn the right to challenge people, and we earn the right to challenge people by supporting them. If I support you, I've earned the right to challenge you. Then that challenge comes as an extension of work, extension of what we're trying to get you to achieve. If all you ever get is endless challenge, I'm sorry, that's not the way to lead people today. But if you've got that balance, I've supported you, then sometimes you're a little bit better than that. That's all that needs to be said, because you've got that relationship of support. Support builds trust. And therefore, when you come to the challenging moment, it's not a big deal.
Just to say as well, I'd be really interested in what all three of you have to say about inclusion. What we've talked about a lot this afternoon is being personal, emotional intelligence, connecting, inclusion, and yet we're all in our own homes. You know, we're all talking to each other on screens. We're rarely actually meeting physically face to face at the moment. How do you engage your team? How do you make them feel connected in this current environment that we're in? I don't know who wants to go first on that.
So I've got a bit of experience on this. So one of the best leaders I'm working with at the moment, Louise is the president of TJX, who own TK Maxx, £54 billion retailer. She is amazing. What she does is, we used to do management by walking around physically. Now she does management by calling around. So not Zoom, just makes the odd phone calls with no agenda, just have a chat, check in with people. But she does something every Friday. She has the gossip line where she's available. She's going to gossip, just chew fat, blow the breeze, a real gossip. Anyone can call in, and it's a couple of hours just chewing fat. It's just so wonderful. People feel as though if the boss can relax and have a gossip, how accessible, how good does that make me feel? Very simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the example I would give, and it's something, of course, that can be done in a physical environment as well as a virtual environment, is, you know, every once in a while, just getting people together, physically or virtually, and doing this celebrating success thing. And whether that's just the leader sort of saying, well, you know, let's just run through, you know, what we've achieved over the course of the last month. Now, if I raise both something that somebody has achieved or a team has achieved, and I mention it, that is really quite meaningful to the people who are not just hearing that, but also everyone else is hearing it too. So, you know, it creates a really sort of positive vibe. Having got to the end of all of the things that I've got to say, I found that a great technique was to say, what have I missed? And then it was what was really interesting was what tended to happen was that people would come forward and say, oh, the ops team did this, or the compliance team did that, or you know, the data team did that. So they tended to talk about what other people had achieved, and then eventually, reluctantly, would get on to what, you know, what more they had achieved. But those things at the end of a day or at the end of a month, that way of doing things, again, just creates a really great sense of I don't know, well-being, recognition, thanks, and, you know, as I say, it can be done virtually as well as physically.
Now, I've got a question here for you, Nicky, but again, I'd like all three of you to give me your take on this, because it's about the people in your team and how you find the right people to be on your team. And this person who's got in touch, Rowan Jackson, thank you, Rowan, by the way, he says, you know, in the armed forces, the selection process and development of leaders takes a minimum of 3 days, if not longer. I mean, it's a really huge assessment of someone's personality, character, whether they're right for the job. And in business, you know, that rarely happens. You really don't get a sense of who you're taking on. So what selection lessons from the armed forces do you think you can implement within business that would make sure you get the right team, you get the best other person, and they're the best fit for you, you know? I
think, I mean, the call is absolutely right. You know, there is an intensive sort of recruitment selection process. But you then, of course, you know, you get a group of people who are almost like compliant with, you know, within boundaries. But of course, every single person there, A, is still an individual, and B, will be better at some things than others. So I think what I would say, and I particularly just picking up on our theme of leadership, is that I don't think we can expect people to lead without giving them the tools to do the job. That's my first point. And the second thing is that some people just simply aren't either instinctive leaders or perhaps good leaders. It's not comfortable for them. And therefore, if we find that we have people like that, certainly what I found in the military was the best thing to do was to put them into jobs where their capability and skills and talent were able to thrive, and where they would feel happy without the pressure of being in a leadership role, and then make sure that I'd got good, you know, solid, capable, visionary, transformational, transactional, whatever I required, leaders in other roles. So more selection, more selection.
All right, I've just seen the time and we are seconds away from 4 p.m. So what I'm going to do, I just want one sentence from all three of you before we wrap this up, because Nicole Borg says, what are the key personal skills that have enabled you to be such a success? So if you could say in one sentence what you think it is that made you the success you are, please share. Sahar, to begin with.
I think I would just say authenticity. I think being an entrepreneur has taught me that I am myself. You know, there's a kind of the strengths and those are the weaknesses and whatever vulnerabilities I have, having those out in the open and knowing them. And I think this is the new culture we're all going to go back to, a much more human, you know, at the end of we're humans, none of us are perfect. Some of us bossy sometimes. So it's just opening up and, you know, owning that, I think, is important. And that's what Rene started about, the sort of female leadership. I think women are much less about titles and bravados around corporate culture and more about being authentic, empathy, emotion at work.
Okay, Rene.
So I've made about every mistake you can possibly make. And I think the way I think is the only real mistake is the one you don't learn from. And the message I would give to everyone: if you're bold, you might fail. If you're not bold, you will fail.
All right. And finally, Nicky.
I think I would describe the secret of my success as wanting my people to be the best that they could be. Because if they were that, then everyone was going to win.
Super. I just want to say thank you to all three of you, Sahar Hashemi, Rene Carayol and Nicky Moffat. Thank all three of you for being so frank and open, and yeah, for your time this afternoon. It's been great to hear from all three of you to share. And that does wrap up this afternoon's event. So if you'd like further information about any of this afternoon's speaker or me, for example, do get in touch with the Speakers Corner team. So just to say thank you so much for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.